Hey everyone, Ben here. In today's episode, I'm especially proud to present you Simon Wardley. Simon created something called Wardley Mapping. It's a map that I use to create stellar work with, but also the social media and podcast production. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode.
Oh, Simon Wardley came on by to show us how to strategize, oh my, with maps that plot your business course from genesis to commoditized force. He said, don't fret if you feel lost, just map it out and save the cost. From racks to clouds, it's all a game, but first you gotta learn its name. Oh, we'll be Wardley mapping today, plotting those value chains all the way from custom-built racks to AI hacks. We'll simplify it all, come what may.
Hey Simon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
First of all, on this show, having a guest, my first question always is, can you introduce yourself for everyone who does not know you yet? Tell us a little bit about who Simon Wardley is.
Who Simon Wardley is? Gosh, what a good question. Well, maybe. So, obviously, my name is Simon Wardley. I used to I've built and run companies. I've sold companies. I'm probably best known for creating something called Wardley Mapping. So Wardley Mapping is a way of trying to understand the competitive landscape that you're operating in. It's something I built for myself. I found it useful. I made it Creative Commons, and then it turned out other people found it useful. So other than that, and other than building companies, I've been involved in the open source community for a long time, the agile movements for a long time as well. Mostly I've worked in technology companies, but my background is in things like genetic engineering. I come from a science background, so that's roughly me. On a personal note, what do I enjoy most? Watching my wee lad fly helicopters. He's only 15. He's been learning since he's 13. We do lots of things like sailing, horse riding, and everything else. He's currently learning to fly helicopters, and that's what I enjoy most. Absolutely crazy, but he's wonderful.
You're able to learn to fly the helicopter.
Gosh,
being 15 with just 15 years.
Well, no, he started when he was 13. So what happened is I've been in helicopters many times before in the past, and I had the family over, and I wanted to do something. And so I organised a little helicopter trip. And so we all went down there, and the wee lad's uncle turned up as well. I wasn't expecting to be there. So there wasn't enough space in the helicopter for everyone. So being the fact that I've been in helicopters before, everybody else went up, and I stood with the crew on the ground. And I got chatting with them because I was interested in learning to fly helicopters for myself. And found some details and this sort of stuff. And I asked them, what's the youngest age, by the way? And they told me 13. I was actually floored by this. It was like, you can start to learn. You can't fly solo or anything at 13. I mean, you have to wait till much later to get your pilot's license, but you can start learning. And so I thought, well, I could spend all this money learning to fly a helicopter myself, or when the wee lad gets off the helicopter, if he's really enjoyed it, I'll just ask him, do you want to learn to fly helicopters? Which is exactly what I did. He was delighted by the idea, so I spend the money on him, and which is what you always do. Every parent spends their money on their child, not themselves.
This is so interesting. So you're able to fly helicopter even before you're allowed to drink a beer.
Oh yes, and
so the government thinks you're responsible enough to fly
before you can learn to drive cars as well. Yeah,
yeah.
There we are.
Yeah, makes totally sense. Yeah.
It's terrifying. I sit there sometimes. I sit there at the side of the airport, having my cup of tea and a biscuit, watching the wee lad go up, learn to do auto rotations. That's the bit where they switch the engine off and it plummets. You switch it back on, and you're sitting there with your cup of tea. Fairly terrifying. It's we do all these things, like we're learning to sail. He does horse riding, shooting. For holidays, I tend to spend my time in the UK and do all these activities. I love doing these sorts of things with the wee lad. Call him wee lad. He's 15. He's taller than I am. But there we are. We spoil our children. And you're becoming hopefully a father soon, aren't you? First
Yeah, I
time for
will.
you as well.
Yeah, first time.
Fantastic.
First time.
Well, congratulations. I mean, it's it's an amazing and exhausting and terrifying experience. And I won't give you advice other than the fact that please just ignore most people's advice. I mean, but half of them are lying most of the time. We all go through these moments of, what have I done? Oh my gosh, and it's perfectly normal.
Yeah, I already found that out. I read a couple of books and they were so contradictory in telling me what the right approach to all of this is. So
Yes.
I just ignored it, talked to friends, like ask specific questions when I want to know the answer. But there are questions where I don't want to know the answer because I know I won't get it anyways. I can ask whoever I want. I need to experience this myself.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that you invented Wardley Mapping.
Oh, guys. Gosh.
Did you name the thing after you, or how did that start?
Right. So the whole thing was a bunch of accidents anyway. So it's I'd love to think I sat there and with the genius of my mind. No, it was a whole bunch of mishaps and accidents which ended up me creating this thing. So fundamentally, it started. I was working for a particular company. It had about 16 different lines of business. So one of them was an online photo service. It was doing very well, except for the CEO was completely clueless. Okay, I had no idea what they were doing, and I know this for a fact because I was the CEO. So I used to come up with all these pointless vision statements, basically just words put together, just junk. And then I ended up in Charing Cross in a bookstore. And I was talking to the bookseller, and I was talking about all the strategy books I'd read, and I was getting nowhere. I was learning nothing. A bit like that, the child, reading all these books, I'm just getting more and more confused. And so she asked, had I ever read Sun Tzu's The Art of War, which I hadn't. And she was fantastic at sales because she persuaded me to buy 2 different versions of the book because they're all translations. And I'm really grateful for that because it was in the reading of the second one that I spotted a pattern. So Sun Tzu talked about 5 factors that mattered in competition. 1, have a purpose and moral imperative. 2, understand the landscape you're operating in. 3, understand the climatic patterns, the weather, the heavens, how the landscape is changing. Then you get into principles, so doctrine. So that's basically how you organize and structure yourself. And then you get into gameplay. And I was fascinated by this. And through a bunch of accidents, that took me into a journey into understanding landscapes and maps. And then through a whole bunch of other accidents, I discovered that I had no maps. I had loads of things called maps: business process maps, mind maps, customer journey maps, systems maps, loads of things called maps, but none of them were in fact maps. They're all graphs. And so what I sort of assumed at that point that when people, I'd never done an MBA or anything like that. I now help teach on a few, but I sort of assumed that this mapping thing obviously was what you learnt when you did MBAs. I hadn't done one, so I had to create my own cheap and cheerful way of doing it. And so that's what I did. It took me probably about 6 months to a year to get the format. And then I had a way of mapping my environment, and I started to find that useful. And I shared it around with others, and I made it Creative Commons. And people would ask me, "Well, what's that called?" And I would go, "Well, it's a map of your competitive landscape." So people would say, "Oh, but I've got this map and this map." Okay, well, we'd better give it a name. And so I thought, well, it's got users. It's got a value chain in terms of the chain of components that you need to meet the needs of the users. And it's got this concept of evolution on the map. And so I thought, well, we'll call it value chain map. And somebody said, no, there is a value chain map already. And then I was using it for strategy. So I said, well, we'll call it strategy map. And somebody said, there is a strategy map already. None of them were maps, but they were all graphs. And so out of frustration, I just went, well, we'll call it Wardley Map then, because I bet there isn't one of those. So that was the name. And so it became Wardley Map. And it's just stuck, and it's grown from there. So yes, it was created by pure genius, and no, it was a bunch of absolute accidents all along the line, and eventually turned out with something which other people seem to find useful.
So how does a Wardley map look like? How can people
Gosh.
imagine that?
Right, well, first of all, we better start by understanding the difference between a graph and a map, and why most things we call maps are in fact graphs. So if you imagine, let's take three locations, Nottingham, London, Dover, connected by two roads. There are three locations in the UK are connected by two motorways. You can position those nodes in any place, and you can obviously connect them up with the lines, and it's still the same node line or diagram.
So like a subway map. When you look at a subway map, it's not the dots are
That's a
not
very
where
special
the
class of map. So we'll come to that in a minute. So normally, if you just take 3 points and connect them by two lines, you can turn it 90 degrees, turn it 90 degrees, turn it 90 degrees. It's still the same, 3 points connected by two lines. And that's a graph. Now, a map, if you turn it 90 degrees, fundamentally changes the meaning of what you're looking at. And the reason for this is that in a map, space has meaning. So if you move a piece in the map, it's not just about the nodes and the connections, it's also where that thing is on the map as well. Because what you're doing is you're trying to map or represent an underlying landscape itself. So in order to do this, you need three characteristics. You need some sort of anchor, such as magnetic north. You need a position of pieces. This is north, south, east, or west of this. And you need something known as consistency of movement. I.e., if I'm going north, I'm going north. I'm not going south. Okay. So if you've got those three things, then you can describe a landscape by giving space meaning. And so that's what I found, and that's what I did with mapping out a business landscape. So what are the components? Well, you start with the anchor, which is, in my case, if you're mapping a system, whether it's a system you're building, whether it's a political system, whether it's a nation state or an industry, you start by thinking about who are the users. And those users might be public consumers, it could be the business itself, it could be government. If you're mapping out a prison system, it'll be things like the government, the public, the judiciary, and prisoners. So those are the anchors that you have for your map. The next thing you have to think about is what are the needs? Okay. And so if you're mapping a tea shop, for example, you might have two anchors, business and the public, connected by a common need for a cup of tea. Great. Now you have to ask yourself, that need requires other things to make it happen. So this is where we build a chain of needs or a value chain. So for example, the cup of tea would need a cup, tea, hot water. Hot water needs cold water, a kettle. So you can describe a chain of needs. Now what you've got now is an anchor at the top and a chain of needs, which is partially ordered. It's partially ordered on a concept known as visibility. So the cup of tea is visible to me. And inside the cup of tea, well, it's a cup, it's tea. And tea has the leaves and hot water. And hot water has... So there is a chain of components, a supply chain, creating that need. But the further you go down the supply chain, the less visible it becomes to you at the top. So it's a partially ordered list. Now that's a graph still. Anchor, position, because we're missing movement. And it turns out that all these different forms of these components are forms of capital, and they evolve through a common pathway. So if we're talking about physical activities, they start off with the genesis, the first time something's ever happened. You get custom built examples of the same thing. So like the first time someone created a radio, then you get custom built radios, then you get products and rental services. And we normally then talk about feature differentiation. So my radio is better than your, worse than your radio. And over time it becomes a commodity. So we stopped talking about the radio. We were more talking about what's on the radio. So radio times or whatever it happens to be.
Let me ask you a question here.
Yeah.
On the scale from Genesis to commodity,
Yeah.
are we looking specific as at an organization? Like, is that a Genesis for the organization, or do we look at our
Right.
planet and say, is that a Genesis on our planet?
All right. Two things there in terms of the evolution side. Is it yourself or is it the organization? And you asked a previous one, which the tube map. Right. So we'll get to that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to describe the landscape, users a value chain, and then for each component, you simply ask how evolved those components are. And that creates you a map. And that's a Wardley map. And it's as simple as that. Simple as asking the question, who are the users? What are their needs? What components are involved? And how evolved are those components? And the reason why you ask that evolution question is the way we treat things changes as things evolve. So the way we treat something which is custom built is very different from the way we treat something which is a commodity, even though it has the same name. It's the same thing. It's like penicillin. The way you treat penicillin in the early days when discovering about it is different from it becoming a generic commodity. Right. So that's that. Tube maps. Tube maps are very special classes of maps. The reason why they're special is because the entire space is collapsed to the tube lines itself. Because you can't get onto a tube and say, I'm going north, because that would involve you digging a hole and all the rest of it, a new tunnel. So the entire option space is actually collapsed to the lines. Now, so in that case, you've got nodes and lines, but it is a map because the entire space is collapsed to that. Whenever you map out a business, you've got nodes and you've got connections like, you've got a cup of tea requires a cup of tea, requires hot water requires kettle. Well, that kettle could be custom built. It probably was in the past because there weren't standard kettles. It could be a product. It could be more of a commodity. So there is a wider space outside of those lines and connections. So tube maps are very, very special classes of maps because the entire space is collapsed just to the map, to the tube lines. So your question now, where do you map from? You map from the perspective of the marketplace. So often on a map, you will draw where something is in the market, and then you'll add yourself. So going back to the tea shop example, a kettle is obviously commodity. If I am custom building kettles, that's probably something I probably shouldn't be doing in my business, particularly if I'm a tea shop.
Yeah.
I mean, be like custom building my own electricity supply. I could do it, but it's probably not a sensible thing to do. Okay.
I was just wondering, like, if you take NVIDIA, for example, as a company, and you look at the, I think they're called like Blackwell racks or the H100s. For NVIDIA, they're probably commodity because they have an abundance of them. They're producing them.
Okay.
But for all the other companies that build data center, an H100 would be something somewhere between, like, just leaving Genesis, maybe. I don't know.
Well, you'll have to give me a bit more details on this because I don't know this particular example.
Yeah.
But before you do, I'll give you an example. A particular insurance company. This insurance company had a bottleneck, and it was the bottleneck in the organization was the speed at which it could get new compute into its data center. So we're talking data centers, right? And so they'd come up. They spent 6 months looking at this bottleneck, and it was all to do with racking of servers in modification of servers. And so they'd spent 6 months working on this, pulled up a business case. They'd come up with this idea of using robotics to basically improve the whole process. So what they had is a business process map, which is not a map, it's a graph. They were looking at the process flow. They found the bottleneck, and the issue was, this bottleneck with racking, mounting. And so they came up with this plan of robotics. And it was millions they were about to spend. Now, I was asked to come along, and of course, the problem with most organizations is that we run on stories. And that doesn't sound a bad thing, except for the fact that we tell people that great leaders are great storytellers, which means when you challenge somebody's story, you're challenging the person. So if you've got a story and I challenge, I'm saying you're not a great leader, so confident. So I can't go in there and say, why are you spending a bucket load of money on robotics? Because they've spent 6 months working on this, they have the business case, the return on investment calculations, the whole lot. So I said, could we just map this? It was about 15 minutes of argument about whether we should, and then they took about 15 minutes to map. And so they created this map, and they start off with users, needs compute. They put compute in product, and compute requires goods in, like somewhere for it to go, and servers, which they put in commodity. And they also said it requires a rack, mount, and modification. Now, the rack they had in custom built. So I looked at this and said, I was simply not able to, not challenging them. I'm saying I think there's something wrong with the map. I said, why have you got rack in custom built? And it turns out they had custom built racks. And so I said, well, what are the modifications you're making to servers? Well, the servers we buy don't fit our racks. So we have to take cases off, drill new holes, add new plates to get them to fit our racks. And of course, as soon as that conversation came out, somebody immediately said, why aren't we using standard racks? So all the bottleneck was from the fact that they had custom built racks and modifying servers. And of course, as you standard racks, they didn't have that problem, didn't have to have the robotics. In fact, afterwards, we actually had a conversation about using cloud instead. Now, why did they have this problem? Why were they using custom built racks? Well, at some point in the past, there was no such thing as standard racks. So there they are, the early adopters, blah, they put their own racks together. They had a company make them. And that became a story, it became part of the organization. And without a way of visualizing the space, they had no way of challenging what they were doing. So despite the fact that racks are highly industrialized, highly standardized, and servers are designed to fit in them, they were sitting there customizing servers to fit in with basically something which only existed because of some past story, which they'd never challenged. That's unbelievably common. Now, tell me about this NVIDIA, because I don't know this example.
Yeah. So my question, I think you partially answered it already. My question was that for a certain company, something can be a commodity, especially if they're producing it.
Yeah.
But it could be a genesis for another company because it may be like the high end of the tech spectrum that is available. Or did I get it right?
No. You look at it from the industry point of view. So if you take something like Amazon, AWS, we'll take EC2. EC2 is simply represents a shift of compute from product to utility. That's all. So it's volume operations, all the rest of it. Behind the scenes, inside Amazon, a bit like with electricity production's commodity, utility, it's a plug. You put it's a socket, you put your plug, switch it on, bang, most of the time it works, okay? But behind the scenes, there's an entire supply chain of components and wonderful new things being created. We've got, because of use of things like solar power, we've got less mechanical inertia because we have less big spinning heavy disks. That's involved in resilience actually of the grid itself. So we have to have these mechanical inertia devices, all sorts of wonderful things being built. Okay, that's behind the scenes. But to everybody in front, it's just a commodity. Okay. So often, you take something like cloud. So cloud computing simply represented the shift of compute as a product to compute as a utility. It's the evolution of something. Now, in terms of adoption, of course, 2006, it was relatively new. Well, it was new to most companies. EC2 has come out. It doesn't make compute new. Compute's just simply evolved to more of a utility. But some people would say, oh, it's a new innovation. Well, compute is not a new innovation. And all we've done is go from compute to products, compute as a utility. Adoption is low, but that will increase over time. So one of the common mistakes is people confuse evolution with diffusion. So diffusion, the idea of diffusion of innovation created by Everett Rogers, made famous by Geoffrey Moore with his Crossing the Chasm, which is just a little bit cut out, the jump you have to make. So what happens is things appear and they diffuse in a society. And then you've got a more evolved form appears and that diffuses in society. And then a more evolved and that diffuses and a more evolved. So evolution is made up often of hundreds, if not thousands, of diffusion curves, each with their own chasms. And so the evolution of something like, I said, the radio, you start off with first people create radios. Okay, you get custom-built examples. They spread. You get early adopters and laggards building your own crystal radio sets, and then it becomes more of a product, and those spread, and then eventually a commodity. So if you take something like cloud simply represented the evolution of compute as a product to a utility. In the early stages of cloud computing, there are early adopters to the more evolved form. Okay, eventually the laggards, there's another diffusion curve, the diffusion curve of the commodity, which was different from products because we'd gone through waves and waves of diffusion of compute as a product. So always remember there's a difference between diffusion and evolution. And why does it matter? Because it catches people out. Whenever you think about how things evolve, there's we talk about disruptive innovation, Christensen's work. And Christensen used to get into an argument with Lepore. Lepore would say that disruption theory is not predictable, and would give examples of why. And Christian would say it is. So there was always these big arguments going on. And Christensen himself would say things like Apple is going to fail against Nokia. And of course, Apple did. So the Lepore would say, well, hang on, you got that wrong. It turns out there are multiple forms of disruptive innovation. And one class is predictable and one class isn't. So when we talk about the shift from product to utility, that is a form of disruptive change, because you're going to get all these product vendors stuck behind inertia barriers and these new entrants coming in. And that's highly predictable in terms of we know what's going to happen. We know it's going to create new practices. So we knew things like DevOps would appear, etc. We know it's going to be what we call a punctuated equilibrium. It's a highly predictable form of disruption. That's product to utility shift. Another form is product to product substitution. So that's Apple versus Nokia, whatever it happens to be. That's highly unpredictable. You don't know which way that's going to go. It depends a lot on actors' actions, whereas the product to utility shift depends upon aggregate market effects. You cannot see this stuff if you don't map the environment. All you see is, disruptive innovation, and sometimes it seems to work and sometimes it doesn't seem to work. If you can actually map the landscape, then you start to notice these patterns, that there are multiple different forms of it. And you can then use that sort of stuff to attack a market. And to give you a concrete example of that, I used to run strategy for a company called Canonical. They provide something called Ubuntu. I ran the cloud strategy stuff for them. 2008, we were 3% of the operating system market, up against Microsoft and Red Hat. It cost us $500,000. Took 18 months. We went from 3% to about 70% of all cloud computing. And Ubuntu pretty much still today, this is some 14 years later, dominates that space. We did it by mapping out the environment, using those patterns, knowing what was predictable, what wasn't, using the maps to work out where to attack.
So you would say that Wardley mapping is mostly used for strategy work, and to it helps you to find your strategy, or is that the use case?
I've certainly used it for that. I mean, people use it for all sorts of things. People use it to map themselves. Kelsey Hightower does a lovely talk. Kelsey, a fabulous chap, very heavily involved in the whole, he used to run pretty much the Google Kubernetes side. I mean, he's really fantastic. You should get him on, actually, if you haven't got him to speak. he used mapping to map himself, which made him make career choices. And I won't spoil the surprise. You need to go and have a chat with him. So I do a lot of stuff from nation state to industry to you can map cultural systems, political systems, all sorts of things. And often they're used for simple things like challenging assumptions. It's like the insurance company. Why are we custom building RAG? That sort of stuff can save huge amounts of money. There's a chap called Liam Maxwell, who's at AWS, used to be the CTO for UK government. There was one particular project, by simply mapping it out, we saved about 450 million just by introducing challenge into the process. So that's often common. Another one is methodologies. So it turns out that when you map a space, if you're dealing with Genesis custom built things, extreme programming works very well there, because that space of Genesis custom built we call the uncharted space is constantly changing. We're discovering and learning, finding out about things. We don't know what it's going to be. So change is the norm. So any project methodology you're going to use needs to cope with constant change and reduce the cost of change. Extreme programming is fantastic for that. Of course, as the same thing evolves, eventually it becomes a commodity as it moves across the map. And when it's a commodity, well, you don't want change. You want minimization of deviation. So things like Six Sigma are fantastic there, outsourcing. And of course, there's a transition between the two. And the transition, we're all about learning, reducing waste. So things like lean work really well there. So you end up with this realization that there's no such thing as one-size-fits-all methodology. So if you use Agile everywhere, extreme programming, it's as bad as using Six Sigma everywhere. What you do is you map out your environment and apply appropriate methods. And that's not just project management, financing, marketing, investment decisions. It's all the same.
So I used it for this podcast, actually, because
Oh, you're kidding me.
No, I'm not.
Well, can I start interviewing you then?
I'm not sure if I used it that correctly. So what I did is I was thinking of, I only have limited time to do the podcast and to do the Stellar Work project, because I'm doing this on the side.
Yeah.
I have to having a real job, so to say. Mm-hmm. So I have very limited resources. So what I did is I create an experience for my listeners, or for the viewers who are watching on YouTube or Spotify. Mm-hmm. That I designed it in a way that I thought it has a good design and it's attracting a lot of people. And then I was mapping out my current workflow. I was like, right. Okay, what am I doing here? What do I need for that? What do I need for that? What do I need for that? And then I was researching everything that was more to the Genesis side. That I put on the Genesis side from my perspective, because I had to do it myself. I was researching on how to automate it. In order to be more efficient. And everything that was closer to the surface, like everything that, like all the posts you see on LinkedIn, all the editing on the short videos, so everything that a lot of people consume, that's when I spend my time, because that's when I want to make like that personal connection, and I want that to be unique. I don't want that to be like the generic ChatGPT answer that everyone else has, right? But everything under that, like the editing of it, if I'm saying in this podcast, now I have to actively put it on, because I have an AI searching for those words, for those filler words, and then removing them from the podcast. All the short video upfront editing, so I get a pre-edited short video. So I try to commoditize as much out of it as possible.
Awesome.
But I needed a map to really make a plan on what I need to tackle next.
So did you find it helpful? Did it make you ask questions?
It did.
Good.
And it helped me to get an overview and a priority on things, because I was always like spending a lot of time on certain things that I didn't realize that I could commoditize them that are actually commodity. Like I put them into the false category, so to say. And I also realized that I was like trying to fix things that are not actually the bottleneck, where I had like more potential to save time. But for me, it was really hard that if
racks.
so for me, it was really hard to determine in which bucket I should put things. Like, is this a product? Is this Genesis? Because I'm always thinking, like, is this one of the things that I want to make the core of the project? Do I want to pour my heart in it? Do I want to be innovative here? Do I want to be seen? Do I want to stand out with it? Right. So I always was confronted with that decision, like, what do I want it to be? So if I want it to be something special and unique, then I have to put it into Genesis. But then I would have to ask, like, what does it take to deserve to be there?
Marketing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite characters, a chap called Gary Dahl. Gary Dahl bought builder's rubble, rocks. He took a rock, didn't clean it, put it in a cardboard box with some straw and a leaflet called How to Look After Your Pet Rock. And he sold those for $20 a pop. Now, the rock cost a couple of cents, the straw a couple of cents, the cardboard box a couple of cents, the leaflet a couple of cents, so probably 10 to 15 cents manufacturer, sells it for $20. I mean, you could have gone into your garden, picked up any rock, it would have just been as good. But he created this whole imagery about pet rocks. We spend an awful lot of time trying to persuade people that things which are commodity, because we want them to be commodity, cheap, reliable, blah, but of course we want to sell them to other people as high price, designed for you, and all the rest of it as well. And there's a whole bunch of techniques and gameplays which people can do to make that happen. And of course, if you're buying the stuff, you should be realizing, I'm being sold a rock for $20 and not necessarily a good. But that requires you to understand the components and actually challenge. Now, there are a number of tools and techniques like the cheat sheets and things like this, which are published, which are characteristics for each of the different stages, which helps you. But it's just the process of just discussing and talking and collaborating with others, asking that question, why is our racks custom built? Why are our kettles custom built? I mean, those are usually the biggest savings. And I mean, ridiculous sums of money are lost because of not understanding who your users are, what their needs are, what components are involved, and how involved those components is. Really simple. I'm so glad that you found it useful. One of the things, did you ever feel you created the perfect map? Or is it an ongoing exercise?
No, it was always, the map to me is always, so on paper it was a map, but once I look at it in my brain, it automatically formulates a to-do list. Like I see only construction sites on this. But that's part of my DNA. I only see construction sites. Okay. I only see projects.
So one of the things that mistakes that people make is they try to create the perfect map. And there is no such thing.
Oh, no, I mapped what I had. I didn't map what I wanted.
Well, all maps are imperfect representations, even geographical maps. Okay, if you want a perfect map of France, it would have to be 1-to-1 scale, which means it would be the size of France. It would be France, which as a map, that would be useless because somebody will have moved something. I mean, I'll just pull France out of my pocket. No good whatsoever. So all maps are imperfect representations, which is also great because it encourages people to share and challenge and not get defensive about people saying, I think something's wrong on a map, because all maps are wrong. They just sometimes happen to be useful. And that's the key thing about it. And so I'm really glad that you found it useful. You made my day. There we are.
Thank you. If people want to dig deeper into Wardley Mapping and learn a little bit more about it, where can people find some more information? Where can people maybe reach out to you and find more of your content?
Well, I do advisory for retainers for a couple of companies. I suppose I should get a website up and all the rest of it. I'm terribly bad at doing that sort of stuff. And I haven't done that. I do some public speaking. I've also written a partially completed book, an uncompleted book in short, and which you can find at medium.com/Wardley Maps. But there's an entire community of people out there doing mapping. So there's Ben, who runs a site called Learn Wardley Maps. He does teaching courses. There's Chris as well. He does wardleymaps.com. He does teaching courses. There's Mark Craddock, who does a whole bunch of things around mapping, use of AI in mapping and teaching around that. There's an entire community, all sorts of wonderful people. Susan Kaiser, who does organizational stuff with mapping. Anne, who does green software, uses mapping in that space. So big community. So you just have to search for Wardley Maps online, and you'll find people, and you'll find tools like MapKeep, online Wardley Maps, and so myself, I do public speaking. I'm always happy for people to come and chat with me. You'll find me on Twitter, X, as Swardley. So just ping me there, and I'm often public speaking as well. So I'm always happy to talk to people.
Awesome. I try to provide, because you mentioned so many different links and resources. I try to provide everything in the show notes. So when you're listening to this, now's a good time to maybe open up the show notes and check out the different resources. And yeah, if you reach out to Simon, say hi, say that you came from the podcast. That would be super cool. Simon, thank you so much for being on the episode with me. I hope maybe we can do another one and dive a little bit deeper into different maps. But for now, this was a really cool start. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right.
And congratulations on the journey into fatherhood.
Thanks. All right. Till then. Bye-bye.
See you then.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you like Wardley Mapping as much as I do, make sure to check out the different communities and resources. You can either listen to me talking about them, or you can open up the show notes and click on the links directly. But there's a bunch of communities out there that support Wardley Mapping. Just to mention a few, you will find Simon's books with all the cool insights about Wardley Mapping. Go check that out. But ultimately, there are more and more communities out there. There's a Discord community created by Simon that is called Wardley Maps. You might want to check this one out. Or there's learnwardleymapping.com, a site which helps you to learn about Wardley Maps. But there is much more. There's a Wardley Mapping forum, and there's MapCamp. Check out MapCamp to connect with different people from around the world and talk about Wardley Maps. Learn and share your insights. There's also a Slack community which you can join and share your learnings. There's a LinkedIn group, and there is a newsletter. I know there's a bunch of communities out there, so make sure to check out the show notes and see the list and pick one that suits your needs. All right, till next episode. Bye.
Oh, Simon Wardley came on by to show us how to strategize, oh my, with maps that plot your business course from Genesis to commoditized force. He said, don't fret if you feel lost, just map it out and save the cost. From racks to clouds, it's all a game, but first you gotta learn its name. Oh, we'll be Wardley mapping today, plotting those value chains all the way from custom-built racks to AI hacks. We'll simplify it all, come what may. It all began with Sun Tzu's view, the landscape's key to what you do. He mapped out battlefields for war. Simon thought, I can map much more. So CEOs who lost their way could finally have a better day with maps that show which path to choose. You'll never, ever have the blues. Oh, we'll be Wardley mapping today, from Genesis to product, come what may. Disrupt the scene, or just stay lean. Let's evolve the game we play. You've got your kettles and your racks, why custom build? Just check the facts with maps to guide your every task. No need for business, e-boulder dash. So if your podcast's feeling slow, map your process, watch it go. Automate the filler fluff, leave the personal bits that make it tough. From AI cuts to YouTube views, map out the parts that you should use. And when you're done, you'll feel so smart. Wardley mapping is just the start. Oh, we'll be Wardley mapping today. With Simon's maps, we're finding our way. We'll sail, shoot, and fly, but never ask why, as we Wardley map our day. So if you're lost or in the dark, just grab a map and leave your mark like Simon's son in his helicopter. You'll soar, you'll glide, oh what a shocker! And remember, it's not a graph, it's a map.